Okie doke. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here on a Wednesday night. I am Robin with Decoding Dyslexia, Idaho. And I just want to quickly do a thank you and a shout out to our sponsors this year. I've got them up here on the screen. 208 Prime Valley Real Estate, Rocky Mountain Electric, Idaho Forest Group, Christian Brothers, and I don't know if I'm saying it right. Is it Sleaton Companies?
Sleaton.
All of those. Huh?
It could be Sleaton, since I now learn how to do syllabication.
There you go. I'm so glad.
I feel.
All of those are gold sponsor members that really donated a substantial amount to our efforts this year, as well as JMJ Financial Group. So tonight's webinar is on dysgraphia.
Oh,
I'm sorry, on dyscalculia. On dyscalculia. It's on dyscalculia. Let me clarify, I promise. And we have with us Dr. Kim Zadel, who happens to be a retired math teacher who was also our Idaho State Teacher of the Year in 2015. She was a West Ada School District teacher and also the 2009 Idaho Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science. She is currently retired, although she was the busiest retired person I know, has become an NILD educational therapist, is actively working with students remediating those with learning disabilities, and also is a board member for Decoding Dyslexia Idaho. So thank you, Kim, for being with us tonight. This webinar will be interactive, so please feel free to post your questions in the chat box and I will interrupt Kim and we can ask questions and interact. It is being recorded, and those that couldn't make it tonight and all of you who did make it tonight will receive an email with a link to the recording. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, Kim, and you can get started.
Okay. This will stop other screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Yes, I got to figure it. All right. The technology is always fun. All right. So first thing, if you want, you can keep your camera on or you can turn them off. Robin, when we record, does it show all the little faces on the side? No? Okay. So if you want to keep them on, that helps. That way I get some feedback as to whether I'm making sense or speaking Greek, which a lot of times my students say I do, because when you teach high school math, some of those words are not in their vocabulary. So we're going to talk about vocabulary and math. But what you need for this presentation is a blank piece of paper, a lined piece of paper, a pencil, a number line on the floor, which you can imagine, a number line on a blank piece of paper from 0 to 20, and a small set of objects. Now I have these little tiny erasers, or those are really tiny. And I have some dice. They're a little bit bigger, but go get, little pieces of candy. Chocolate works great when we're doing this at night, when you're about ready to fall asleep after a long day with your students. So grab something that, up like 10 little items. And then when you're done, you can kind of give me a heads up. I don't know if you can do the reactions. You can give me a hand that says, I got it all. We'll give you a couple minutes. So while you're collecting all your things, are there any questions about dyslexia before I go into dyscalculia? So we can answer a couple questions on that before we get started, or dysgraphia.
And you can unmute yourself and ask questions too. This is a small group, so we certainly can be interactive.
You seeing any questions, Robin?
No, if everyone's posting who they are and where they teach, or if they're a mom and all that kind of stuff, but no questions.
Oh, we have someone from Wyoming. She's one of my students. Someone likes my background. Yeah, this is my grandchildren's bedroom when they come and visit. So we have Spider-Man and Elsa. So I call them my superpowers, keep me focused, add a little humor. Got Pocatello, West Ada, Pocatello, Craigmont.
Harm is here with us.
Just moved from Mississippi, a school psychologist. Ooh, we love school psychologists because they're the ones that start the whole process.
Yes, and from Pocatello, thank you for being here. I support a lot of families in that area as an advocate, and I appreciate you being here to learn more about our kiddos.
Okay, so with that, let me get rid of the chat so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, this is on dyscalculia, and I'm going to come up with a word which I never looked up to see if it's a true word, but the condition is called dyscalculia. And if a person has it, since we have dyslexia and you're dyslexic, I just changed it to dyscalculiac, which are hard to say, but anyway. So I am dyslexic, and we figure 1 to 5 children in our schools are dyslexic. And the ones with dyscalculia, it's 5 to 7%. It's a very small amount of our students, but if they have it, they will struggle, and they're pretty easy to identify. So we'll go over some of that right here. So I'll give you the definition of dyscalculia, some of the indicators to look for when you're looking for, does a student have it? And different strategies and games that you can play with your students to help the dyscalculiac, there's that big word, learn math. I'm pretty sure dyscalculia is hereditary, just like dysgraphia and dyslexia. But you will find quite a few of your math and science teachers at the high school level are dyslexic. It's always fun when I go to conferences and I find my peers that are dyslexic. And I think it's because as a child, I had to go to summer school for my dyslexia and learn how to read, but you always had to take 2 classes. So I took math and reading. So I was doing algebra in 4th grade with the 6th graders, which was fun. But it also was frustrating because my 3rd and 4th grade teachers wouldn't tell me why I missed a problem or how to do a problem if I found it on the what we call now the ISAT. So, okay, so what is dyscalculia? It is it's one who is impaired in the condition of calculation. That's it, not big long thing. Computational procedures for basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, operation are difficult for these kids. So that's why calculators come in handy. However, some may or may not be impaired in all quantitative skills or the visual spatial skills involved in learning math. So this is where they can do some of the other stuff. So what does this mean? It means they can do algebra, geometry, and higher, which is what one of my students that I've been working with since she was in 9th grade, she's now in her 3rd year of college. And it wasn't until this summer when I really started diving into what is dyscalculia, how does it manifest itself, how do we help these kids, that I discovered her ability to do algebra and geometry, which is what I taught her, wasn't just me being a really good math teacher and the ones before me being lousy. It was she had dyscalculia. She could do algebra, she could do geometry, she could figure those out, she could see those, but could she add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions, decimals, do percents? No. And so as a college student, once I figured out what she had, I said, do you have a calculator listed as on your IEP at the college level? And she goes, no, because she's also hard of hearing and dyslexic. And so I said, well, go back to the school, talk to special services and see if you can get that added to your IEP. So when your math classes, you can use a calculator. She walked into the office, told them, they immediately put it on her IEP. I wish that speed could be done at the K-12 level instead of all the hoops we have to go through. But that's one thing we're working on. So she can problem solve. These kids can critically analyze the situation. They may not be able to come up with the calculations, but they can tell you what you need to do. They can see the whole picture. So like they see the forest instead of the trees. They understand spatial relationships. And this is why they can take an object and flip it around and it's still the same object. This is why the B's and the D's and the P's and the Q's become a problem for these kids. Because if you flip a chair around, it's still a chair. And if you flip most of those other letters around, it's still those letters. But with the B's, D's, P's, and Q's, you flip them, you get another letter. And that's why it's difficult for them. And one of the strengths of these kids, it's with the dyslexia kids as well, is they can see 3D in their brain and they can flip it around. And these kids are great entrepreneurs, architectures. The other thing I will warn you with dyslexia, you lose words, especially if you're stressed. So, putting on these is a little stressful. So every once in a while, I will lose a word that I'm looking for. So your architects and your engineers are great if they're, those who have dyslexia. So the key concepts that need to be taught explicitly in math with these kids, you cannot assume that they can learn these concepts without you explicitly telling them. It's like reading. A kid with dyslexia needs explicit instruction. So they need to be taught how to count. They need to internalize concepts so it's in their mind's eye, and then they can take what's in their mind's eye and relate it to an external symbol. So they can see the quantity of 5, they can relate it to the number 5. Same thing with the number line. They have a little number line in their brain and they can relate it to the physical number line. A place value is difficult for them. Part to whole relationships, which is harder for them than whole to part. So the research says start teaching whole to part, and I have an example of that later in the presentation. And then the key operations, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And then some of them need help with the problem solving, these steps to do, and vocabulary. You have to take the vocabulary, chunk it down like you do the simplification that you do with reading, but do that with your math. And if you teach science, do the same thing. Anytime you have a new word, break it down to the kids so that they understand what that word means. And with the kids with dyscalculia, as well as those with dyslexia, in order for these things to stick in their brains, they need like 40 repetitions, not the normal 6 to 7. So they need a lot. It gets boring for the teacher to repeat, but that's what these kids need. So figure out games to keep you involved while you're teaching these. So with the number counting, we have, they have to be able to rote count objects, learn that one-on-one correspondence, and they have to understand that as the number increases, that means there is more of them. That's a quantity. So what are we going to do to help kids with this? Well, we have to practice what comes before and after a number. The kids will be okay with after. So if you say what comes after 5, most of the time they can say 6 once they've got it down where they can count up to 10. But if you ask them what comes before 6, they will struggle. And they'll probably have to go back to 1 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll say what comes before, and they'll go back to 1 again. So with my little one, I work with 2 4th graders that are twins and a 2nd grader, their sister. All 3 are severely dyslexic. One of them, I think, has dyscalculia. The other 2 are doing fine in math, but again, before and after sequencing is very difficult for these kids. And then practice what comes between 2 numbers. What comes between 4 and 6? What comes between 35 and 37? So with your older kids, use bigger numbers. With the younger ones, stay little until they can figure out how to do it. Okay, so what I want to do is take your M&Ms or paper clips or whatever small object you had. Try to grab a bunch without looking at how many you got and put it in front where you can reach them. This is our hands-on activity. I'm trusting you're doing it. Okay, then I want you to close your eyes, put your hand over the object. Well, you don't, no, just close your eyes and then count how many objects you have. You have to have your eyes closed while you're doing this. And I see some people doing it. And if you have children, they can participate too. Okay. How many did you have? Show me with your fingers, because I don't think you had too many. So how many objects did you find under your hand? Is anybody participating? I got 4 and 6. Thank you. And the rest are hiding. Okay. So that is an activity you can do with what we call our littles. So this would be with your kindergartners, preschoolers, first graders. Any child, it doesn't matter what age, if they can't do it, then work with them on it. So if they have trouble with that one-on-one correspondence, help them out. Okay, the next one is the dot activity. And you can find these dot patterns usually online if you look at dot patterns. And the easiest for children is if you follow the pattern where you have in the down here with the 5. Where's my mouse? Okay, there's my mouse. Okay, here's the 5. If you keep that as a pattern until the kids get used to it, and then this is the 4. On this kind, when you get in these weird configurations, that makes it a little harder for the kids to start with. So what I'm going to do is show you some cards, some dot cards. And in the chat, I want you to write down how many dots there were. I'm only going to show it for probably 1 to 2 seconds because you're adults. These are a little easier. Tried them on my husband and he says, if I could see them all, I could do it. So, all right. So I'm going to show you the dots. Then when I put it in the chat, but don't hit enter. And when I count down to 1, then press enter. Okay, so here's the first one. How many were there? So stick it in the chat. And now 3, 2, 1, enter. This is called a waterfall. We have 6s and a 9. I hope the 9 is not somebody who has dyslexia and flipped the 6, which is possible. All right. I need someone to unmute and tell me how they came up with 6. Somebody be brave, or I will call on you.
I just saw the top and completed the pattern in my head.
Okay, so did you tell me what the top is?
So I saw the ones on the ends and then the 2 on the top, and knowing it was symmetrical that there had to be 2 on the bottom.
Okay. Anybody do it a different way? It's going to be a long evening. Somebody else?
So I saw the 4 in the middle and then the 2 on each side. So I knew 4 and 2 was 6.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Anybody do it a different way?
I folded over. You had the 3 on the 2 on the top and the 1 on the side, and like folded it to match the 2 on the bottom. And the
So
in
you
my
fold-
head, when I folded it, it matched. In reality, it doesn't.
But if you folded it the horizontally or vertically, it would match. That's another way.
Yes, that way it would. Yes.
Yeah. So this is what we need to get our children to do, start chunking instead of trying to count them all, because you don't have time. I don't give you enough time. Okay, here comes another one. Okay, put it in the chat, but don't hit enter until I say so. 3, 2, 1. Oh, oops, if I move my chat so I can see. So we have 8s. And someone didn't see it, sorry, I go fast. So we have a lot with 8. And how did you see the 8? Let's have somebody explain what they saw. Something different.
I think I saw mine like in the middle, and then the ones on the sides is how I got the 8.
Okay. Anybody else?
I saw 2 groups of 4 looking at the line of 3, and then the one next to it, and knew it was a mirror image.
Mhm. Okay. How many are there? This is interesting. Either I didn't show you the whole thing, or we only saw part of it, because there are 10. Everybody said 8. So that's where we get discussions. It's not that you did it wrong or anything like that. It's these help us, the kids. Okay, here's another set. Okay, put it in the chat. When I say enter, hit enter, or when I say 1. So 3, 2, 1, enter. Okay. Don't have any disagreement on this one. Oh, yes, we do. Okay, somebody else, how did you figure this one out? Somebody? Ah, somebody said they counted. Okay, so depending on the age of your students, depends on how fast you do this and how complicated and how many dots you show them. So somebody chunked by 2s. Thank you, Nicole. And Raphael, thank you for responding. You can put in the chat if you don't want to unmute. Okay, we got 2 more. Oh, someone said they saw 3 and 3 down in the middle and 2 on the sides. Good. 2 groups of 4. Sorry, I went too fast to get your responses. Okay, on that last one, 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Somebody said they took a mental picture. That helps. So we've got 19, 28, too fast. Yep. This one is harder. The more dots, the harder it gets. Okay, this one, it was 4 by 3 with another 4. So yeah, it's 16. Very good, Nicole. So you talk to your students about how they do these. Okay, last one, the most challenging one. They didn't line up. 3, 2, 1, hit enter. Too fast, yep. 16, 14, 9, 10, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9. Okay, you guys are good on the one that's not lined up. So how did you guys do this one? Groups of 2 across the top and group of 3 on the bottom. Okay, somebody counted them, counted by 3s. So is there only one way of doing these? No. And that's what we need our children to do, is start what we call flexible thinking. Somebody did a 6 + 3. All right. Okay, another one that we can do with our children, let me get rid of the chat for a minute so I can see, is this internal concept versus external symbol. So this is where we have the kids have to get into their brain, that mind's eye, what 3 looks like, what 3 things look like. And it could be anything, but they have to be able to visualize 3 things or 5 things, and then be able to represent it with the number 5 if they're looking at 5 things. So for this activity, if you have numbers, little wood ones or foam ones or plastic of the different numbers, you can take the number and have the child close their eye, and you hand the number to the child and have them, through feel, tell you what the number is. So this is another one of those kinesthetic where they have to manipulate it with their fingers to figure out what it is. You can also do this with letters. So the children that have trouble with that have dyslexia, have them hold the shape, have them move it around in their fingers until they can figure out what it is. So this is going from an internal, where they have it in their mind's eye, to that external symbol that we have. Robin, we got any questions yet? If not, I think I lost Robin. Okay. So an internal versus external number line. Okay, this one is where I work with my high school students with the number line on the floor. I have them spread out along the 4 walls and then down the middle, either between the desks or around the desks, wherever I can put them, depending on how many students I have. The only problem with putting it down with masking tape is if you leave it there too long, the janitor doesn't like you because it doesn't come off. So pick it up every once in a while. If you've got tile floors, do the same thing. Every once in a while, take those off the floor. Painter's tape, the red masking tape, seems to work better on being able to come off. So for this activity, everybody's been sitting, and I know you had a long day at school, so I need you to stand up. This is one of those where I'm going to trust you. Need you to stand up, and if you have a number line on the floor, if you were able to do it really fast, okay. Otherwise, using your mind's eye, pretend that you have a number line on your floor, and I want you to stand on the number 4. From there, I want you to move forward 5 steps. And if I had remembered to tell you to unmic so you could yell out your answer, you should be on the number 9. And then you can have your students go back to their desk. And if you allow them to, with an expo marker, they can write the equation or the number sentence on their desk. Now, we discovered at my alternative high school that I taught at that expo markers do come off the top of our desks. They just rub off, so you don't even have to use water. Okay, now I want you to stand on the number 10 and hop back to 0 by 2s. So this is a coordination activity as well as a math activity. It's also good to help you figure out which students have balance issues, and balance is not related to dyslexia. They're 2 separate things, but a child could have trouble with it. A child not being able to know left from right, that is a dyslexia issue, but being able to balance. So that's one of the myths out there, that balancing is a sign of dyslexia, or that's how you treat dyslexia. No, that's an old myth. So if you had to hop back from 10 back to 0 by 2s, and the kids do this and count while they're going back, they would have jumped 5 times. So this helps them understand the concept of subtraction, multiple subtraction, or multiple or division. Okay. Any questions on that? So just remember that you have to use the external number line explicitly to teach addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You got to make it kinesthetic somehow. Okay. Fractions. So what I do, and I do this with my high school students, is I have them cut fraction strips. Now with you guys, I would, if you're mostly elementary, I would cut out these strips. I have 5 of them. They're all different colors. I have black, red, blue, green, and yellow. And they're all the same length. It's the large construction paper, it's that length, and they're 2 inches wide. So with these, and I have my students do this, they each have a pair of scissors. And this one stays whole. This is our whole. Then I have them take the next one and get everybody using the same colors. Otherwise, you're going to have issues later when we're talking about what makes what. Then I take the red one, I fold it in half. And then I cut it. So now I have 2 of these make the black one. So I have the kids lay it on top so they can see 2 reds make a hole, or 2 halves make a hole. So then I take the blue one, and I have to, you got to go slow, have the kids help each other. Take the blue one, I fold it in half and cut it. Then I take the 2 and I fold it again and cut it. So now I have 4 pieces. And it takes 4 pieces to make a whole, but it only takes 2 to make a half. Or if I said that the half was the whole, then these 2 are now halves instead of fourths. So you can change the denominator depending on what you call your whole. So I have the fourths. And then I take the big green one, fold it in half. That gives me half. Fold it again. That gives me fourths. Fold it again. As you can see, this gets fun. Fold it again, and now I have 8s. So I have 8 little pieces. And then the last one, this is a tricky one because it has to go to 16. They fold it in half. And then what I do after the kids have all of these, I give each of them one of those clips that look like, this is a big one. So these, so that they can clip them and save them in their desk. Then I fold it again, that's in fourths. Fold it again. And that makes 8s, and we verbalize this as we're doing it, and then we fold it again, and hopefully we can cut it. And we got 16. And as I said, I do this with my 9th graders, and they're in my algebra class, some of them. But I don't assume that any of my high school kids, even though they're in my algebra, my geometry, or my algebra 2 classes, that they know basic math. I always go all the way back. And then depending on the group, depends on how fast we move up. But then you can use different combinations on how you can use this. So I was wondering in the chat, or if you want to unmute, do you have any other ways that you do this to help kids? Any other physical way, a hands-on with fractions that you use with your students? Anybody have any suggestions for the whole group? Last time I checked. Anybody have any ideas that they'd like to share with us? Doesn't look like anybody's typing. And the other thing you always need to learn is wait time, especially with your kids with learning challenges. They need that wait time, and they really appreciate it when you give them the wait time. I have fraction strips that are pre-made, but like what you have just done. Yeah, pre-made works, but because they didn't actually do it themselves, doesn't stick as well. So you can do, I have them all hooked together. You can do it like this, and then, you know, when these start falling apart or they lose them, then go to the pre-made one. These are come in plastic. Circle fractions kind of work. It's harder for the kids to visualize those. Somebody else have anything? The other thing you might try, this happens with me once a year usually. I get laryngitis, so I can't speak. And so I teach with no verb, or no, I don't speak, so the kids can't hear anything. And usually I will have two reactions. One, I had one student get extremely upset at the high school level and threw his desk and walked out the door because he could not learn if I wasn't speaking. But I also had 4 students come up to me afterwards and say, thank you. The speaking, the sound makes it hard for them to understand. So every once in a while, I will teach a lesson without speaking. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't have that many students that are just visual learners. But try it once with your students and figure out which ones are your visual learners and your auditory learners. Most kids are both, but you may have one that just is visual. And so when you work with that kid, remember that and try to use fewer words. Okay, another way you can do fractions is with the Cuisenaire rods. So if you have one, it'll take 2 of these purples to make a hole. And if you try making the green ones, which are thirds, they don't work. They're too long. So the kids learn, that size doesn't work with this. So depending on what you consider whole, and this is why I like Cuisenaire rods, is because this could be my whole. So then the purple becomes the halves, or I can make the purple the whole and the reds become the halves. Or I can go back to this being the whole, and then these 2 reds make half of the whole. So you can talk about different types of fractions, and then you have your little white ones. So one white is half, it's hard to see the white. 1/2 is part of the red, is 1/2 of the red. So if you don't have Cuisenaire rods, and there are a lot of activities with Cuisenaire rods, before you go out and buy them, check the closets in your building where things are stored and stuffed. I found the Cuisenaire rods at my high school because somebody was smart enough and bought a whole bunch of manipulatives for the high school students. But before you go out and buy, double check and see if you have those already, or check with the other teachers. And if someone's not using them, take them. Okay. So this is where we talk about whole to part relationship. So we have the 5, and then we have a 4 down here. Okay, this is what we call a representation. It's not the numeral 5 and the numeral 4, it's pictures. It's not the real thing, so that's why it's not concrete. This is representational. So then we talk about what's missing in this one from this one. And one thing that's really good to do with kids is to say, sorry, I'm on my wrong screen. So these are the eyes, these are the nose, and these 2 make the mouth. So what's missing here? So you do this with your kindergartners and 1st graders, and they'll go, the nose is missing. And then you could eliminate these 2 and ask what's missing. And they'll say the nose and the eyes. So this is how you start. You're starting with the whole and going to the part. And this is real important with our kids with dyscalculia, that we start with the whole and then go to the part. So we're really doing subtraction first. That seems to be better for these kids than going from this one to this one. So go the other way, then switch it around and go, what does this one missing to be this one? Any questions on that? I don't have my chalk. Oh, don't see any. Okay. So key operations. The students need to understand that numbers can be added together. And one concept you can ask kids if, and this was done with a bunch of kindergartners, if you add two numbers together, do you always get a bigger number? And that is a great way to get kids to do a lot of addition problems. And it took a week until one of the kids came back to school and said, if I add 0, it doesn't change. So, give them these open-ended problems to see what can you add to get the biggest number, what can you add to get the smallest number. And then we have takeaway, same way, subtraction. Use the vocabulary the proper vocabulary, and then one that the kids can relate to. Like with fractions, we have numerator, denominator. Kids can always have trouble with which is which. Denominator starts with a D for down. And then I talk about top number, bottom number, numerator, denominator. I flip back and forth between the two so that the kids can get a grasp, because they have to be able to relate the word to something they know in order for it to stick. And numbers can be combined through multiplication by doing repeated addition. Multiplication is just faster. And numbers can be taken away through division, which is really repeated subtraction. Okay, how to teach the 4 operations. Okay, they're best taught through multi-sensory, motor, touching, and orally counting along the external number line. So we're going to use that number line, and we're going to followed by written math facts, writing the math facts in visual numbers and using multimodal methods. So my husband is Dutch, and he's from Curacao, it's an island in the Caribbean. And I went down and watched a 3rd grade class, and they were doing, they were adding, I think they were multiplying. And they took the numbers and like if you had 243, they wrote 200, 400, and 3. They did the decomposing of the numbers, and then they did the multiplication, and then they added. And it was all done orally. The problem was on the board, but the kids recited orally as a group as they went through solving these problems. So this is one of those where we do look first. The kids look at the problem, they say the answer. They look at the problem, they write the answer. They hear the problem from the teacher and they say the answer. They hear the problem and they write the answer. So what we're going to do here is we're going to teach the steps of computation in terms of both time. So that's the order of the steps and the procedures. We consider time with procedures, and then space. So is it columns, diagonals, or other spatial displays? Some kids do okay adding and subtracting horizontally. Most need it vertically. And do your different ways. Have the kids tell you how they did it. And then for those that struggle, those who struggle, do provide them with note cards with the steps on them. Okay, and then we have problem solving and vocabulary. Math takes a lot of vocabulary. And now that we have a lot of our math books are, as my husband would say, storybooks. Many years ago, I was looking at curriculum in California, and I brought home about 5 different math books and showed them to my husband. English is a second language for him. And as he looked through the books, he was like, okay, this one looks all right. This one looks all right. This one looks no. And I said, what's wrong with that book? He says, too many words. So that was a clue to me that our ESL students, our children that struggle with reading, would have trouble with those kinds of books. And so we need to make it easier for them. We need to not necessarily teach keywords, which some people do, but we need to teach them how to identify the math words and what they mean. So we have to teach the math, the vocabulary. They have to listen, they have listening comprehension. So if you give them mental math problems orally, they got to be able to listen and comprehend. They have to be able to read and comprehend. They have to have the writing skills. So they have to be able to write the numbers automatically and legibly so they can read it and you can read it. They have to know place value. They have to know the math calculation skills and do them in the proper order. And then while all this is going on, they have to self-regulate, self-monitor. And this is where my students have trouble because I have one with ADHD. And so while she's trying to do this, next thing I know, she's talking about something that happened at school. It's like, and especially on time tests, she will, like, I'll give her a 1 minute time test when I'm giving the Whitcock-Johnson, and she'll start talking halfway through. It's like, no, you just missed 30 seconds because you're talking. Positive emotion. If the kids don't believe they can do it, they're not going to be able to. They have to be motivated to want to try. They have to have a cognitive and working memory processes. So all of this is involved in math. It's just not reading and just not calculating. So multiple systems are involved. So we have lots of things, but here are the 5 systems that are involved in math: sensory motor, oral and written language, cognition and written language, social emotional, and intention and executive functions, which is kind of what I was explaining a minute ago. Okay. Math, or sensory and motor, they have to be able to touch. So they have to integrate, and they're saying that kids with the sensory motor, if they can integrate the two, that's an indication they can do calculation skills. So this is where jigsaw puzzles come in handy. I have my high school kid, we do it as a math project for figuring out averages and percentages and graphing, but it lets me know whether a kid can see the patterns, match the patterns, and how they saw it, whether they do the frame first or do the insight first. So it's something that, you know, what you do with your students, it's a nice fun activity, but it tells you a lot. Use only kinesthetic sensation and no visual to count the objects in the beginning, which is why we did the closing the eyes. Graphomotor skills is how they write. Counting by touching and counting on fingers. Okay, this is important. They say there is a connection between using your fingers and retaining. Touch math, not so much. Okay, written and oral language. This is where the children need to discuss math concepts and procedures. They need to say the steps as they solve the problem. They need to teach each other, and they need to teach the language. So this is where, when my school went, it's a brick and mortar high school. When we went totally online for math, I lost this teach each other component because the kids are at different places. They don't normally work well together to start with. A lot of them are insecure. Others, you know, they're autistic, their social skills are bad. So when they did this, I lasted about another year. And then I told my principal, I'm sorry, I cannot teach in this environment anymore. I can teach blended, which I did with my kids. One class would be totally face-to-face, and then the next one would be online with me intervening. So that's a blended situation. But when you're totally online, kids at all different locations in the curriculum, they don't have this discussion, which they need. They learn better from each other than they do from us.
And there's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Is it wrong to teach keywords?
It's not wrong, but sometimes the keywords don't help, because then all the kids are doing is looking for keywords and they're missing the concept that may be taught. At the lower grades, not so much an issue, but in the upper grades, yeah, the keywords may not be part of the problem. They always like to stick in stuff you don't need. So, you know, you kind of have to look at the problem. Yeah, but for the kids with dyslexia, That might help to be able to have to only look for keywords and not have to read all the other words. Okay. Great question. Cognition and working memory. Cognition strategies alone will not help a child who has a working memory problem. So you have to help the child increase their working memory. Great activities for this are to give the children 4 numbers, like 2, 8, 4, 9. And now then you'd have the student repeat those. So they go 2, 8, 4, 9. And when they can do that 10 times in a row and get them right, then go up to 5 numbers. Now my little 2nd grader, she does fantastic with the 4 numbers. When I add that 5th one, she can't do it at all. And so that's something we're working on. Once they can do 3 or 4 numbers in a repeat for you, have them do them backwards. So if I say 3, 1, 9, 5, you would repeat it forwards. 3, 1, 9, 5. And then you would say it backwards. 5, 9, 1, 3. And this is, I do this quite frequently with the girls I work with to help with that working memory. Okay, emotions. If you don't like math, your students won't like math. If you like math and are excited, your students will be excited about it. They feed off of us, they feed off our parents. I think our country is the only one where you can say, I don't do math, I can't do math, and that's acceptable. That is not acceptable in the other countries around our world. I had a teacher that I worked with who was a math and science teacher. Science, she just blossomed. You could feel that energy. And the kids responded. And when she taught math, you could feel the anxiety coming off of her because she wasn't as secure. So be secure. It's okay to make mistakes. I have what I call them prizes, but they're really little pieces of candy. So when I do something wrong on the board or read an answer wrong, which is typical if I'm tired and my dyslexia, I won't read the answers correctly. And so I reward the kids. You catch my mistakes. Let's talk about them. So emotions are huge. So with my kids, I always have the whole class chant, I love math. And they'll argue with you saying that's lying. And I said, no, we're training your mind. And then they will go, I can't do math yet, but I will. So keep it positive. Attention and executive functions. The students have to be able to focus on what's being taught or discussed. The teacher has to be well organized, have well-organized lesson plans that are multisensory. And the kids need to learn how to stay organized. And so this is where graphic organizers can help, because in math, you got to be able to plan. You got to be able to sequence what you're doing. You got to be able to handwrite or write it, copy it. If you have students who can't copy, don't make them. Get it written, make a copy of that page so that that's a skill that's hard for these kids. Note taking and other outputs requiring accuracy and efficiency. So help them with those with their executive function. These are mostly your dyslexic kids. And many times the kid will be dyslexic and ADHD, dyslexic, have an auditory processing or a visual processing. So the comorbidity is there. They're also the twice exceptional. So you have one with dyslexia and they're gifted. So there's a lot of combinations. 5-minute activities. I just realized the time. When I did this on my own, it took me 45 minutes. So I'm going to skip this one. You can read through it, because you have the handout on it. So counting activities, count by ones forward, count by ones backwards, starting at different places. I was out one day and ran into a kindergarten teacher, and she was all excited because her kids were counting back by 2s, and they'd start at 10 and count back. And I said, why'd you stop at 0? She goes, well, because we don't teach negatives. I said, do it anyway. So she did. She had them counting back. And here in Idaho, we go negative in our temperatures. And she came back a couple of weeks later, we met, and she said, they can do it. And I said, yeah, our kids can do things as long as we don't scare them from it. Always start at different numbers and skip count. So if you're skip counting by 2s, start at 3. That makes them have to think a little bit more. Okay, this is where we would do a blank piece of paper. So you have one, draw a number line from 0 to 20. And then I'm going to give you some oral directions. So when you're given your directions, give them orally. But as I said, some of your kids, they are auditory. They're not auditory, they're visual. So write it on the board. So here's your number line. So I want you to put your number on 5. And then with your finger, count up 5 more. And where are you? Write a math equation or a number sentence. Then another activity you could do is put your finger on 0. And then what we're going to do is multiply 5 times 3. So you're going to jump and go to 5, and then 10, and then 15. And then help your students write 5 times 3 equals 15. And then you can also do division where you start at 15 and you're going to divide by 5. So have the kids count back by 5s. So we started at 15. You're going to go 10, 5, 0. And how many jumps? It was 3. So depending on the age of your kids, will depend on how sophisticated you make these problems. But anytime you can make it hands-on, kinesthetic, it's better for these kids. Okay, this is one of those, the math fluency where we do teacher say and students say. So the teacher would verbally say 5 times 2, and the students would say 10. So this is requiring the kids to listen and then say the answer. Teacher could say 5 times 3, but this time the students have to write the answer. So they're listening and writing. Then you can write on the board or have these pre-made, show them with no words, 6 times 2, and the students give the answer. Also pause, remind the kids we are going to count to 5 or count to 10 before they say the answer, to give all children a chance to respond. And then the teachers would show 5 times 8, and the kids write the answer. Remember, pause. They need that change. Okay, grid paper. Some teachers will give the kids graph paper, grid paper to do their math problems. Be careful. One of our teachers did that, and I could not handle having to do my math on grid paper or graph paper. There was just too much there. So for the kids that don't like it, a lot of them do because it keeps the columns nice and neat, have them use line paper, turn it sideways so that the red line is at the top. And then they just have columns to work with. They can write the computation problem down, and then they have to explain to a buddy what to do, what steps, and then both of them solve. And they trade off who's the one that's explaining how to do it. So pair them up. And this is where I'd always put a kid with dyscalculia with one who knows their math facts so they can help each other. Another way to introduce fractions is using pictures. So what is half the number of legs for the little boy? 1. What's half the number of legs for the puppy? 2. And what's half the number of legs for the octopus? 4. This is where we're starting visually. If you can have concrete, have dolls and stuffed animals that have different appendages, that works better. Then you can go to the pictures, which is the representation, and then into the actual numbers. Which is more? This time the kids can get really confused, and it's a good indicator of what's going on with your students. What's more, the 5 or the 3? Some will say 3 because it's bigger. Which is more here, 4 or 5 stars? 12 is how much more than 10? Here we're going from whole to part. Sidewalk chalk activities. Anytime you can be outside with the nice weather, and hopefully our weather's not going totally south, I'm up in McCall and it's going to rain tomorrow for the next 2 weeks. But you can do long division and you can do multiplication out on the playground. Have them write the problem big on the playground, and then they have to jump to where the numbers are supposed to be written. And so this is a great way for them to be kinesthetically involved. They have to think about where they're going, and they can, put them in groups of 4 and they can discuss it, and it's fun. And you can do that. You can do it with addition too. Carrying and borrowing is a great thing that they can do. Borrowing or regrouping, as the new terminology is. And so here are my resources. Now for this presentation, I use the Benninger book on dyslexia, dysgraphia, other world language, I think it's other world languages, learning disabilities, and Dyscalculia. Great resource. Bird, she has this book, it's called the Dyscalculia Toolkit, which I have right here. And it has probably 100, 200 hands-on activities. This is what I was going to do if we were meeting face-to-face. This other one by Pfeiffer, it's for dysgraphia. Nancy Mather, I didn't know if she had this in her slides. This is her book. And I don't have it where I can show you. And then Shally, the Shaywitzes, husband and wife, they teach at Yale University. Great book on dyslexia. And with that, are there any questions about dyscalculia, dysgraphia, or dyslexia? And I will stop sharing. And everybody can turn on your mic or turn on your video so we can see your pretty faces. There's Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Thank you. So does anybody have any questions? Hi, Carla. Some of you are my students from NNU. I do offer classes at NNU on dyslexia. Just one that's giving me no questions, thank you. Okay. Any questions? How many of you are elementary school teachers? Raise your hand. 1, 2. Reading specialists. High school teachers? Special ed teachers? School psychologists? I know we got one of those. So what do the rest of you do? Somebody unmute and let me know. I know we have some parents, grandparents.
OT.
Oh, occupational therapy. Great. If you've never talked to an SLP, please do. They're the ones that are going to help you with teaching the vocabulary. I thought they only worked with helping the child speak correctly, but no, they work on vocabulary. So I would always give the SLP teacher, this is high school, I give her the list of words that we would be covering that week or the next 2 weeks for all of my students. And so she would know what to work with them. So do work with your specialists. OT is great too for dysgraphia. If you haven't heard of rhythmic writing, do look it up. That's great as an OT activity. What are the rest of you? Stacy, what do you do?
I teach kindergarten.
Awesome. Do you have a screener that you use with your little ones for dyslexia?
I have not seen one yet. I'm only in my 4th year.
Well, those even in their 20 years still haven't seen one. For
Right.
those of you looking for a good screener, there's David Kilpatrick's called, you can go www.thepast.com. And it deals with the phonemic and phonological awareness. It's a great start. Julie, what do you teach?
I teach first grade, but I do have a question for you. I was trying to type it, but it's too much.
Okay.
My question is this. I have a student who I think has dyscalculia, or however you say it. But I thought he had dysgraphia. The thing is he can somewhat count numbers, but not always accurately. But then I'll say, oh, okay, write that, because he'll count forward on a number line, but he doesn't realize what numbers represent a value. So like he was doing +1, but he still doesn't know what, let's say if you give him 8, he doesn't know what 8 is, but he'll go to the number line and count 1 forward. But even then he has to have someone right there. So my question is this. I want to know where to start with this student, because he cannot in any way do first grade. He just doesn't have the skills yet. But I don't know where to start with him. I was thinking of getting all different ways to show to, having him practice writing to, like on, have you ever seen those boards where they have like sandy or cotton to, but I don't have any of that kind of materials to work with him. So I don't know what to do. He's struggling.
Yeah, that's where you've got to stay concrete until he gets that idea, that 5 things. So like you'd ask him, count 5 and then show me 5 things. My little one that I worked with last year, when she was first grade, I have little tiles with the numbers 0 to 9, because I use Marcy Cook's tile map with the kids. And she could put them in order, but 7, 8, 9, she could get it if she counted from 0, but if I just pointed to the 7, she couldn't do it. So it's going to take a lot of practice, stay concrete until he can tell you, match the word 5 with the concrete 5. Once he can do that, then you start working with the writing the numbers. I mean, he could start practicing writing the numbers. They're probably not going to mean a whole lot to him, but
No, they don't.
Yeah. So you've got to get that concrete with the auditory first.
So basically having all these examples of 5, if the number was 5, and having different representations of that, and then before you ever have him write the number 5, but be able to say that's 5 and count up to 5.
Right.
Okay, Baxter.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, and
right.
it's unfortunately it's going to be a lot of repetition. So if
yeah.
you have a parent, I love having paras, but they got to be trained, and parent volunteers, they've got to be trained so that they know what to do. So they don't jump too quickly to the abstract, which is where you're writing the numbers down. If he has,
So I was trying to have him be able to identify numbers quickly. So I had a script with 0, 1, 2, and 3, and they were all mixed up. Now I'm thinking that was even too much for him, because he doesn't even know what 3 always means. Sometimes he does, but it's not consistent.
Yeah. So that's why you got to go back to the concrete.
Okay.
And then I'd go to the dots from there, and then move up into the actual numbers.
Okay. All right.
Great question. If we can help these little guys when they're little, that really helps. If there is suspected autism spectrum disorder, is it often difficult for students to understand? I don't know the rest of it. That's it.
That pictures and symbols represent real objects.
Yeah. Because the pictures are the representation. And so that's after the concrete. So we always go concrete to representation, which is pictures, to the symbols. And so I know some of your autistic kids, they're great if they're explicitly taught. I had one, he was gifted, but extremely autistic, didn't have the social skills. And so we would play act to teach him his social skills. And, you know, after 2 or 3 months, he had been expelled from his elementary school. After working with him, with his peers, playing him and teaching him how to respond, we were able to send him back to regular school. So, you know, autistic kids figure out which, you know, what works best for them. I know some are very hard to work with because of the communication, but, you know, let's work with your other team members on those. I'm not as well versed on autism. Any others? Okay, for the dysgraphia, kind of give you a heads up. Connie and I have been, Connie Rizzer from the Joshua Institute here in Meridian. We've been talking about rhythmic writing, and that is a hands-on total activity. So she is going to adjust it a little until we can have face-to-face to teach you how to do rhythmic writing. It's impossible. We can show you, but it's not going to make a lot of sense until you actually do it. It involves a lot of, you know, you're drawing 8s, and while you're drawing it, you're saying left and right. And being dyslexic myself, when my girls do it, if they go too fast, I get lost. And so I have to slow them down because I can't keep track of which is left and which is right. But you have them do it, and then you have them reverse which way they're going. And then when they get that down, you add in math problems or sequential things like what comes after January, and they have to do that. And then they also do it horizontally, which the kids find is easier. And then we have a 4-leaf clover that we do. So, you know, I can do this in the air for you, and we can do it on the one chalkboard, and you can see us do it, but it's better if you actually do it. So hers will be a little bit different. It'll be dysgraphia and the mapping, mind mapping with being able to write. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any, Robin.
I don't see any either. I was just looking up rhythmic writing. There's a great video on YouTube, actually, which this webinar is not about rhythmic writing, so maybe we want to hold off. But since you mentioned it, I went ahead and posted it in the chat. I'm very passionate about rhythmic writing. My son is severely dyslexic, and I thought these people were a little crazy when they started with this big figure 8 and this chalkboard. I was like, what are you doing and why? And it 100% reprogrammed my son's brain. It rewired his brain. He did not know left from right. He did not know sequencing, days of the week, months of the year. Today is Wednesday. What was yesterday? What's tomorrow? The number line, all those sequencing exercise, very difficult for him. And as strange as it sounds, that rhythmic writing, crossover body, midstream, big figure 8, saying left and right as you go, and then these other things that the NILD therapists throw at you, which I myself cannot do. He's now a master of, and it both remediated his handwriting as well as several other areas where he was struggling. So I'm passionate about it. So I went ahead and posted a little YouTube video about it, even though this is not that webinar.
Yeah. Does the video go into the motifs?
You know, I have not watched it.
Yeah, and I don't think it is. And that's the difference with what we do with the NILD therapy.
This is an NILD video.
Oh, it's an NILD one?
Yeah.
Okay, so that might
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, I made sure I found an NILD one because I know there's other people out there that do rhythmic writing, and I'm sure they might be really great too. I just personally am can speak to the one that I know was very effective, which was specifically the National Institute for Learning Development's approach to remediating dysgraphia.
Yeah.
But I hate to limit it to that challenge because it really does do so much more.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Zadel. That was really informative and way over my head. But I thought it was great, and I hope the educators that are with us tonight got something out of that. I will be sending a link out to those that registered that can watch this at their convenience. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate to hear that there's so many school psychologists here and a kindergarten teacher. Thank you, because so often, especially here in Idaho, our teachers say, oh, they're too young, they're fine, give him time. I don't know how much I heard, he's a boy, give him time. And I trusted in that, and I did not follow my mommy gut. And I really wish I would have. Time is important. So if you see those signs, regardless of having dyslexia legislation passed in the state of Idaho or any of the pieces that we hope to make happen for our educators here, just be that educator that stands up and does what's right for our kiddos.
And you
Thank you.
can legally say dyslexia and have it written in an IEP. There's a 2015 document that if you need, we can send it to you. I have my.
I'm going to add it. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the shared drive that you all had a link to. I should do that always, because I know there's a lot of Idaho educators that have felt they're not allowed to say the word. But yes, I'm sorry, Kim, sorry to interrupt, but I will post that in the shared drive. It's a letter that was written by the U.S. Department of Education in 2015 that states we can, should, and will use the words dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyslexia in our IEP meetings, on our documents. How can we possibly provide appropriate remediation for these kiddos if we're not discussing what it is that they're struggling with?
And it's dyslexia is also in the new Idaho Comprehensive Literacy Plan. And so it's there, so you can use it. All right.
Thank you guys.
All for showing up.
I hope to see you again the next couple Wednesdays. Next week, we've got Dr. Sally Brown from the College of Idaho. She is going to cover the science of reading. If you're not familiar with the science of reading versus whole language, it's definitely a webinar you want to attend. It really speaks to the science behind how the brain actually needs to processes reading, and why using the phonemic awareness and phonics approach is necessary as opposed to whole language. So we hope to see you guys in the Wednesdays to come. After Sally Brown, we've got an OG webinar, Orton Gillingham based webinar with Karen Kilpatrick. And then the final one, October 27th, is Connie Rizzer with rhythmic writing and dysgraphia. But is she changing that now, Kim?
It's still dysgraphia, it's just the rhythmic writing will be limited.
Okay.
So, and then those of you who need a credit for recertification or just want a credit, you can still sign up for the course. My email is still, and I can still see it in the chat. Just email me if you can't find the course. I don't have the number right here. So it's $60. I don't get paid for doing it. And if you watch just all the webinars, you qualify. You have to just write a summary of what you learned and how you're going to use it in your class. Okay.
Any final questions before we sign off? Thank you, guys. It means a lot to this mama that you are passionate about helping our kiddos. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
See you.